The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round again, the years keep rolling by.
Oh, may the joy of springtime be all around you. I'm Joe Doolittle, and this is Story by Story.
Celebrating the human spirit. And I'm Kate Dudding.
And we are here together in the beginning of April to bring you some good news about storytelling and entertaining and communicating better with people that you love, or maybe people you don't love that you just want to communicate better with, right?
Okay.
And it's through the power and the method of storytelling. And storytelling is an innate characteristic I think we have as people. Mm-hmm. When we talk, we should have a beginning, we should have an end, and we should connect those two things.
With the middle.
With a middle. Now, it's not quite that simple, but it really is almost that simple. And we have a wonderful guest storyteller for you today who's going to share some of the work that she's been doing. And Kate, we share a little bit about what's going on in storytelling with you and I today. And I've been on a cruise boat, so I'm completely, worthless from the standpoint of any. When you go on a cruise, you call that research. That's what that is. It's research for your stories.
I thought it was let's eat every 2 hours.
Like I said, research, research.
But I get seasick, so I've never been on a cruise.
Never been on a cruise. Well,
maybe a river cruise someday, but never an ocean cruise.
Plan on it. I can vouchsafe its value.
Mm-hmm. But in my storytelling world, I am very excited because my 5th CD, Learning About Muslims, is being reproduced right now.
You mean somewhere there's a little cylinder just spinning and spinning and spinning? Is that what that means?
Well, I think of it as Barry Marshall's equipment is humming along.
Okay.
But turning out CDs and CD covers.
And you will have significant numbers of these CDs to display and to promote with other people.
Well, yes.
Good.
But most importantly, is to share the stories on the CD.
And your stories are about
Muslims. And I start with the first contact that I had with Muslims. It was via their folktale character, Nasruddin Hoja, who is a trickster, but there's always one night, Nasruddin Hoja was outside his house looking in the dirt, and his friend came by. They were underneath the street lamp, and, "What are you doing?" "I dropped my key, and I'm looking for it." "So I'll help." So they looked, and his friend finally said, "I don't think it's here. Are you sure you dropped it here?" Nasruddin said, "No, I dropped it in my bedroom." "Then why are we looking for it here? The light's better."
I think that guy lives on my street.
Well, sometimes I find myself, I'm looking for something, and I go back a third time to the place where I know it is, but I've been there 2 other times, and it hasn't been there then, so there's no reason why it should be there now. And Nasruddin Hoja is nudging me, saying, "Try somewhere else."
Oh.
So
that was your introduction.
Then Rumi poetry.
Rumi poetry.
Rumi was a Sufi master, which is a mystic part of the Islam religion, and his poems seem so fresh. Seek passion, seek passion, seek passion. It's on the day I die. It is not the end, it's a beginning. It's not that the door to the tomb is closed, it's that there's an opening. And he was in, I think, the 1200s, and he was the best-selling poet in Afghanistan and in the United States several years ago.
There you go.
So I'm not alone in that. And then it's about experiences I've had at the Interfaith Story Circle in the area. meeting Muslims, learning about them, and some stories from the current news.
So you first discovered this interest in a cultural way of Nasruddin, and then got into the arts of Islam in the poet of Rumi, and then got into some of the hearts of the matter in terms of the religion itself through practicing Muslims.
And visiting a mosque. I've visited 2 now.
I wonder, that may be a good question for us who aren't Muslim is, how many Muslims do you know?
And then again, you may not know that
funny, they look like they just could be us, kind of thing like that.
Well, I mean, and there was a fellow at work who's, I thought he was from India, maybe Pakistan, I don't know. And it didn't dawn on me that he was Muslim. But, son of a gun.
Well,
He was brilliant and kind and personable.
I remember when Gay was having some surgery, and at times I was part of a fairly big medical system, and so the doctor's name was Dr. Ahmed, and I knew he was Muslim, but I knew him, but I called the nurse practitioner over, and I said, yeah, tell me something about Dr. Ahmed. He says, oh, Joe, he's the most Christ-like person you're ever going to meet. I go, hello. So it was, and he was. It's so wonderful, and he was a member of the Islamic Center over in Colonie. So we've done some other things outside of our professions, socially.
And they're just wonderful people. I mean, Dr. Musa Chowdhury helped me with a couple of stories, and she's a radiologist at Bellevue. And so we met at Panera's, and we had lunch together, and she was helping me with a story. And then she mentioned that she had been speaking with her granddaughters in Pakistan before she went to work that morning. And so it was morning here, and it was probably early evening there, and it's halfway around the world. And then she said, oh, I have to go, I have to get ready for work. And they said, oh, what are you going to wear? And well, I haven't decided. Oh, take us up to they're Skyping. Take us up to your closet, and we'll pick out your clothes.
Isn't that fun? Isn't that fun?
So if you've ever watched The Big Bang Theory, that's Raj Koothrappali's parents are in India.
Right.
And for a long time, they were just on a screen, and eventually they came over to the United States. But she's a grandmother.
Well, and I think it's really wonderful that you've kind of been able to harvest and catalog some of your experiences that have come from storytelling in a way that reflects so well on the power of story. I mean, this is great work you've done, Kate. I mean, I don't mean to laud you. I like to, but it's really wonderful, and it's more than timely, and it's something you've been doing for a number of years that's just kind of brought itself together.
For 2 years, I've been working towards this CD, but the first story that I created won. Let me see if I can get this right. Won the Story Slam, which is a competition, at the 2010 National Storytelling Conference in Los Angeles. One Path to World Peace.
Oh,
and that's about Children at the Well, which is one of the programs of the local Interfaith Story Circle.
And I'm driving one of those guys who's now grown up to the Sharing the Fire Storytelling Festival next month, or this month, in Plymouth, Massachusetts.
And he's going to be a speaker there.
He's going to be a speaker there.
Yes.
So that's a full world story. That's a story in of itself. But a lot of things come together, and this is going to be a great CD. And you have your own website where people can find out more about that, right?
KateDudding.com.
And I encourage you, her other CDs are there as well.
And by the time you're watching this, there will actually be a web page on this.
Oh, there you go. You know anybody who does web pages?
I think I know a geek.
Okay.
I'm very close to a geek.
Very close to a geek.
Yes.
Well, this has been fun, and I applaud your CD, and that it's taken a lot of work, but it's been a great act of love and grace too. So we'll look forward to listening to it, and we'll look for your feedback and applause as you experience those stories out there, listeners.
And I believe in the importance of these stories so much that I give permission to anyone to tell the stories. It's on the CD. They're just following Jane Yolen's rules. Mention my name. If the CD is there, hold it up. Don't change the endings. And this is just permission for telling. If you want to publish it in any way on the internet, make your own CD, whatever, then we need to talk. But telling, I want these stories to be heard by as many people as possible.
And that's one of the things that stories should do. They should travel. They should get around. Now, speaking about getting around,
I can't wait for this segue.
Well, you know, I'm a little slow today. I knew it's a great introduction, but I just can't put it together.
Oh, and our group, it's called the Story Circle of the Capital District, and you might think of that as Albany, Schenectady, and Troy, but we have a guest here with us who's traveled all the way from Bern.
Bern, up in the mountains.
Up in the mountains.
In the hill towns. And her name is Nancy Marie Payne. And she's one of my favorite storytellers because we once worked a gig last fall together, and it was a dark and stormy night, and I got to tell stories in the rain outside, and she got to tell stories in the nice, fairly wonderfully warm lit living room. And the moral to that is don't ever volunteer to tell ghost stories. Always go for the inside job. That's right. Welcome, Nancy Marie Payne.
Thank you, Joe. Hello,
So nice
Kate.
to have you here, and it was so nice to do that gig with you. That was great.
That was fun. It was
We
a
had
nice
fun.
evening.
It was fun. And, you know, you've been for as long as I've known you, you've been a storyteller, because I didn't know you before either of us were storytellers. But did you have some sense of when you came to realize that you were a storyteller?
I am the older of two girls, and I have 7 years on my sister, so obviously I had to know it all when she would ask me questions.
I have a granddaughter like you.
I could never tell her I don't know. I think that's where it all started. And she gave me a lot of material. Thank you very much, Linda.
So you recognize you're a storyteller because you got all this material from your kid sister.
No, for my kids.
For my kid sister.
Yes, I had to make it up, Joe.
I see.
She would ask impossible
Why is the
questions.
sky blue,
Yes.
Nancy?
Oh, yes. Those were the types of questions. So I always had an answer. And the wonderful thing is, she believed me.
She believed.
So that's when I knew.
And is
I
she
was,
still speaking to you then?
Well, she does have
She
different.
warped her mind.
She does have different versions than I do, but I give her permission to tell her version, and I'll tell
And
mine.
if you have the CD of it, you hold it up just like that.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes, mine's documented.
Okay.
Yes. So you call her the imp. What does she call you?
Big sister.
Big sister,
Oh, with a capital
oh.
B and a capital
yeah.
S. Oh, what does that stand for?
We got right to the heart of that matter, didn't we? Okay.
It was totally not planned.
Yeah, well,
but
it was
somehow
well done.
perhaps
well done. Well played.
So you got this relationship that created stories in your life. When you were growing up, did where you grew up contribute to the stories that you now tell? I mean, did you grow up like in the country or in the city, or?
I grew up in Schenectady, but I have heritage and roots in Oswego, and that's a very historical town.
Right.
And I lived, well, I wasn't in the city like a block and a block and a block and a block. I was actually in the Pine Barrens, just a few feet away from the Pine Barrens in Schenectady.
Yeah.
So I played in the Pine Barrens. I was next to the Schenectady Blue Jay Stadium, which has its own history.
The Philadelphia Phillies Farm Club.
Yes, the Schenectady Blue Jays.
Yep.
I sold lemonade because it was a very long street. And when they'd get off the bus, it was probably the length of 3 blocks.
Yeah.
And so I'd get them just as they were going in and were very thirsty.
So you grew up in Woodlawn.
I did grow up in Woodlawn.
Oh,
yes.
I didn't realize that. I grew up in Stanford Heights, which is just down the road from Woodlawn.
Yes, it is.
We didn't realize that we was neighbors.
Yeah. We grew up together in separate places.
That's true. That happens sometimes.
And I think I just determined that you are the same age.
So we also went to different schools together.
At the
We did
same
go to-
time.
At the same time.
That's right. At the same time, we're going to different schools.
Yeah. Yes.
Where did you go to high school?
I went to Notre Dame when it was only Notre Dame, before the big joining.
I went to Colonie because I was right on the city line, and I could go either way.
Yeah.
It's been one of those predicaments in my life where I could go either way.
One of the traumatic moments of my youth was when we all went to Woodlawn School, and then they built a Page School on the other side of State Street.
Right.
And anyone who lived on Page side of State Street now went to Page, and I lost my best friends. And see, now look at me now, and I've carried that all these years. It's going to be a story someday.
just because of that arbitrary rule.
That's right.
But they're not. I think that you have some groupies that tend to show up.
That's from
true.
high school.
That's from high
from
school. Friends
yeah.
from high school.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Georgette and
Donna
Donna, right?
and Margaret,
Margaret, yes.
and sometimes Betsy. And I've named you all, so keep coming.
Keep coming. Right.
Not in any particular order.
The order's not a thing.
Yes.
So the kinds of things that began to be part of storytelling for you, there was your sister, of course, but when did you begin to tell other people's stories outside of the family?
In college, I was minoring in history. And I loved history. I then saw a PBS documentary on a historical event that I had no knowledge of. Never saw it in a history book, never heard anyone talk about it. And I'm thinking, what else is out there that I don't know about, that I would like to have information on? And so that's when I started researching the orphan trains out of New York City, and that led me into many other historical pieces.
Yes.
So they came before your Women Aviator?
Yes, the first orphan trains were my first long stories. In fact, they were my reason for joining Story Circle. I had done my research at Bethlehem Library, and the librarian also ran the a club for people to research and put things together.
Cool.
And she asked me if I'd come and talk to her research group, and I said, sure. And then I'm thinking, whoa.
What am I going to say?
What am I going to say to these people who do this all the time? And this is my first big venture into it. And so I said, well, I can tell them what I did, but then I can tell my story. And then I said, how am I going to do that? And someone said, well, do you know about the Story Circle of the Capital District? And I did not, but I joined and was welcomed and practiced, and the rest is history.
One of the best $10 investments you ever made.
It was only $5 then,
Oh,
Joe.
really? I never realized it was ever $5.
Yeah, it was. Back in the 80s.
My.
Nancy Gifford was the treasurer.
Oh, that was before my time.
Yeah.
Because 95 was probably, 95, 96 was when I joined.
Interesting.
So what sustains, I was going to say, what draws you to the long pieces, but it's more, what sustains you through them?
Through them, yes.
Well, maybe you could just give the listeners, the viewers, a little idea of what we mean when we say a long piece.
Long piece. So this most of the stories that we tell as storytellers, 20 minutes or less, usually less. And then if we put a program together, it's a number of stories that we tell in our program, an olio, a collection. My long pieces are one subject, one topic. And I like to do it in the first person, so many of them I am a character or the narrator of this piece. The first two, as I said, were the orphan trades out of New York City, which went on from 1854 to 1929. Thousands and thousands of young people were transported to other places in the country. How many of you know about that from your history classes? So I did a lot of research on them, and they were the first long pieces. And then when people found out that I did long pieces, too, they started requesting, well, could you put this story together for us? We're having a group meeting on this topic, could you do this for us? And that's where most of the other ones sprang up. The town of Easton was doubled my selections when they asked me to do a piece on women's suffrage and the Easton participation in that, and also the Underground Railroad and the Easton connection to that.
And Easton is in Washington County.
Yes, north of Troy.
And that was a community that was established originally as a Quaker community?
It was, yes.
So it's got a number of kind of rich cultural connections.
It does, and some very good stories on the Quakers themselves out of there. Yeah. They have 2 meeting houses, or 2 of them were active. Now they take turns being active. But yes, it's a community that knows their history and is very proud of it. And their connection with women's suffrage dates back to Susan B. Anthony's sister, who worked there. And there were many houses in that area on the Underground Railroad. Mm-hmm. So they have documented this. And it makes a researcher's job very easy when they've got it all together.
Oh, your acquaintance, Frank Acquaintance?
Yes. He came from there.
Okay.
Was hidden by a couple families up there.
Okay, I'd forgotten where he was.
Yes.
But
yes.
I just put those pieces together. We are now 21 minutes into our show, and we haven't actually heard a story.
I'll be happy to remedy that.
Would you please?
Certainly. I want to take a piece from one of my longer pieces. So you're going to be a little disappointed because it's not going to go to the end. And you can blame Joe and Kate for that.
Take it, we will.
This is from my piece, How I Came to Dwagiac. In the 1800s, a missionary in New York City was working with the poor and wanted to do something to get the children off the streets. There were so many children living on the streets, some of them involved in situations that would eventually end them in jail. And so he started a home for them. But they were always go back to the streets. And when they left him, there was no recourse but living on the streets for so many of them. So he came up with this idea, which was new, but it was also very ancient. All through history, people have sent children somewhere else. The Celts sent their sons to be raised by another member of the family, a prominent person in the tribe. One of the people that came over on the Mayflower was an orphan and was sent with this crew. You go back in many of in Jewish history, in the Bible, you read about these disconnected children that are living with someone else. So this is an ancient practice. So he said, well, why don't we send these New York children to houses out west? They are underpopulated out there. People need help on their farms. Women need help in their houses. We've got all these children. Let's ship them west. And eventually, they went to every continental state and territory in this great country. A lot of them were orphans. Some of them were half orphans. Some of them weren't orphans at all, but under circumstances ended up in orphanages. So some of the stories are very, very sad. Some of them are a little lighter. I tried to go for the lighter ones, but you can't get away from the tragedy. In the West, especially the central states, there are many societies that have learned of their ancestors, this piece of their history, and have started orphan-trained societies. And that's where a lot of my research went, to these, besides New York City, of course, but then getting the stories of some of these people. And they weren't all children, but getting the stories of some of these people that ended up in the western and central parts of the United States. So my first story is a fictionalized main character, but I put her in this situation of this first orphan train out of New York City. The minister, his name was Charles Loring Brace, devised this plan where he would send agents to a town, and there would be placards put up, and they would say, on such and such a date, children are coming from New York City, come gather, take one of them into your homes. And that's what would happen then. These children would come on a train from New York and be taken into someone's family. If they weren't, they then went back to New York, or to try again, or maybe not to try again. Many things happened along the way. Many changes were made. Reverend Brace and his community of people would send an agent out every year to check on the children, see how they're doing. If a child needed to be moved, that happened. So the stories are just, there's thousands of them. By taking a fictionalized character, I'm able to put her into all of the situations, although this never really happened to actually one child. But I do name as many of the children who actually took this trip as I could. The documentation from 1850s is sparse, mostly letters and reports. But I do use a child's name when I can. I do use a child's story, even though I only have a fragment of it, and I use my imagination for the rest of it. So this story's protagonist is Elsie Dowdle, who lives in a moderate income family in New York City, is well loved by her parents, and is an educated young woman. Although she's 10, she reads and writes above her grade level. There has to be a tragedy to be a story from this era. So I won't give you the whole story, but Elsie loses her parents and ends up on the streets. Before the tragedy, she had befriended a little street urchin. And after the tragedy, this little urchin takes Elsie under her wings. So we pick up the story the first morning after Elsie comes to live with Meg. And where Meg lives is a box in an alley with other wooden crates around her, occupied by other children. The tragedy was a fire, and so that when Meg refers to that fire, you'll know where that came from. I woke up with someone shoving me, pushing on my shoulders, saying, come on, you gotta get up, everybody's gone, you wanna eat? I opened my eyes, and there was Meg, and I'm wondering, what are you doing in my bedroom? But then I sat up, and I hit my head on the wooden box that I had been sleeping in. And I was damp from laying on rags on the ground. And it all came back to me. The fire, and Meg bringing me here, and opening up a rusty tin and bringing out a chunk of moldy bread that I had given to her 3 days ago, sharing my lunch with her. And she broke that in half and gave me half. And I'm sitting there holding this greenish-looking bread. Come on, she said, come on, we gotta go. So I pulled my shoes on, and I said, where? Where do we have to go? We gotta go, come on, come on. So I ducked my head, and I followed her out of the box, and immediately she went over to a water pipe hanging on the side of a tall building, and there was water dripping out of that pipe. And under the pipe was a broken mug. She put her hand under the pipe and got her drops of water and splashed them on her face. I just looked at her. And then she picked up that mug and got water in it and drank it. My mother used to raise pigeons on our roof. I could not imagine drinking water off a roof. She offered it to me, and I said, "No, thank you, Meg. I'm fine." She just shrugged her shoulders. "Let's go," she said. Later on, I do find a place to get clean water, but not then. She dragged me out into the street, and there were people walking up and down the streets, going places. You could see they all wanted to go someplace, and they had their mind on it. And Meg looked at me, and she said, "Stay here and watch me." She was going to teach me how to steal. She walked down the street, and she would speed up and slow down, and I'm wondering, why is she doing that? Until I realized that the men who owned shops were coming in and out of their shops to put up their awnings, to bring things out for sale. And she had her eye on one particular man, a grocer, who was bringing out boxes of apples and pears and potatoes. And when he would go into the building, she would speed up, and when he would come out, she'd slow down. Until she got just in front of his shop. He was inside. She grabbed 2 apples, stuck them in her pocket, and ran across the street. And was over there when he came out again, watching him. I'm watching him. I'm watching her. I'm shocked. He made no motion like he knew anything had happened. And so she walked down that side of the street, crossed back over to me, and handed me an apple as she ate hers. I said, "Meg, you stole those." And she looked at me with wide eyes like I was telling her it was snowing or something. "I can't eat that. You have to go put them back." And the sadness in her eyes told me, "You're not getting it, girl. You're not getting it at all." She put the 2 apples in her pocket, the one I wouldn't eat and the one she'd started, shrugged her shoulders and said, "Come on, we'll try something else." We went to another street where again she said, "Watch me and learn." And so I stood there, and she went out into the street, and she put out her hand, and she looked at the first man she met and said, "Penny, please," and then put her eyes right back down. And he gave her a penny. She was begging. My parents never told me I couldn't do that. Not that it ever came up before. But I'd try it. And so I walked out onto the street, and she watched me. And I stood right in front of this nice-looking gentleman, and I said, "Excuse me, sir, good morning. I was wondering if you might have a penny or 2 that you might spare for me?" And he looked down at me, and he said, "Child, do your parents know you're begging?" I turned and I ran. And I could hear Meg's footsteps behind me until finally she could grab my coat and stop me. I said, I'm not doing that again. I'm not doing that again. And she grabbed my face and she said, "You want to eat?" And I looked at her. She said, "First thing, too many words." "Oh, okay. Penny, please." "All right, penny, please. And don't look him in the eye." And then she grabbed my shoulder and pulled me down to the ground and smeared my face with mud. "You're too clean," she said. Put it on my dress. "Now let's go." And we went out into the street. "Penny, please, don't look him in the eye. Stay dirty." And a man came down the street, and I looked at him, and I put my head down and my hand. I said, "Penny, please?" And he put a penny in my hand. I looked at it, I looked at her. She went, "Yes." After about 20 minutes, I had 4 pennies. She had 8. She said, "That's enough. Come on." And she grabbed me and she took my pennies. And she took me down an alley. Oh, it smelled wonderful. There was a bakery. Steam was coming out the windows that were open, and it just smelled so good. Meg knocked on the door. And a woman opened the door. She had a white apron on and that was powdery all over it, and her hands were all flour. "Oh, Meg, says she. Well, it's so good to be seeing you, girl. Who's your friend? Elsie. And Meg put the money in the woman's hand. The woman said, oh, you've done good today. Now you've done very good. You stay right here. And the woman went in and came out and gave us each a sticky bun. They were a day old, but I guess I might have been the only one to know that. And a half a loaf of bread. We said our thank yous. We ate the sticky buns right then and there. And then Meg said, come on, we've got to save the bread. And we took it back and went into our crate, and under the rags, Meg pulled out the tin, opened it up, and put it in. And that was my introduction to living on the streets.
Whoa.
Thank you.
Whoa.
You took us right there.
Yeah. Yeah. I was there. Oh.
So that, obviously, she gets on a train at some point, and her travels bring her through Albany, so there's an Albany connection, and that did happen. And she ended up in Michigan. And as I said, she's not a real person, but the other children from that trip were. And they all have found homes in Michigan.
Amazing. Amazing.
Yes. And we'll have another story from Nancy Marie Payne right after our coming attractions. And so, as usual, on the first Tuesday of the month, there'll be a Tuesday Tales and Stuff at Arthur's in the Stockade on April 4th.
And that works with a feature teller who we don't know who's going to be here at about 7:45 for about a half an hour. And the time before and after that is open for anybody to do anything they'd like with words or music. So please plan on coming down and sharing that time.
And then on Sunday, April 9th, will be the 123rd Story Sunday, Stories and Traditions from the Iroquois Longhouse, with Kay Olin and Tom Porter. We are very honored that they are going to be with us, that they are traditional storytellers, Iroquois storytellers.
And sometimes when you think about the Haudenosaunee, or the Mohawks or the Iroquois, you think about them historically being in the past. And one of the really great things about Tom Porter and Kay is that they are very much in the present. And Kadashareki, the community that they've reestablished over in Fulton County, was the result of Tom Porter's insistence in living out the dream that the Mohawks would be returned to the valley after they were driven out during the Revolution. So they are very present now. They are back in the valley where they once were, and it's because of both the power of the story and the power of the culture and the love and the determination of a real good group of people who will be with us on that evening of storytelling.
Then on Wednesday, April 12th, that's the second Wednesday of the month, the Storytelling Open Mic up in Saratoga. We alternate between Cafe Lena and Woodlawn Commons. On the 12th, we're at Woodlawn Commons, where it's free. It's 7 to 9, and there it's storytelling only, no notes. Then on the second Friday of the month, which is April 14th, there'll be a Shawnee evening at the Irish American Heritage Museum in Albany, on Broadway, just a couple of blocks south of State Street. And there'll be some wonderful tellers there. Then our very own Story Circle meeting, where Nancy Marie Payne got her start, will be at the Pine Hills branch of the Albany Public Library on April 19th. There'll be a learning session at 6:15, and then 7 to 9 sharing stories under development. And it's really a very safe environment that you can just tell your story, and that's it. If you want people to say nice things, you can get that, appreciations. And then if you want feedback, You can get that too, and you can even control how much. Was there anything confusing? You can be very specific. When the mother and daughter were talking, did you know who was talking? Do I need to clear that up more? So I've tried out many stories, some of them several times at these sessions, and gotten a lot of good, kind feedback. My first story. No training. It was a retelling of what I told at my best friend's memorial service, and someone came up to me and said, once it gets a beginning, a middle, and an end, it'll be really good. I went, oh, right, I remember English class, yes. So it had its heart. It just needed the form needed a little shaping there.
And so if you're interested in kind of trying out storytelling, please join us at that program at the Pine Hills Library. It's really a good intro.
And then a few days later in Saugerties, at the Inquiring Minds bookstore, will be storytelling with Janet Carter, Friday the 21st at 7 p.m. And Children at the Well Youth Circle will be on Wednesday, April 26th at 6:30 to 8:30 at the Pine Hills branch, once again, Albany Public Library. Children that Nancy Marie Payne has been coaching. And if you can't find anything on TV that you want to watch, or you just can't bear to watch any more news, come to our YouTube channel, StoryCircle at proctors.org. Click on YouTube, and there are links to over 150 stories, most of them told right here in this studio in Colonie Town Library.
To whom we are very indebted for
Yes.
carrying our production efforts along.
And in a professional and gracious and friendly atmosphere.
Here, here.
Thank you, Greg.
We would give you a standing ovation, but I'd have to stand up and I'd go off camera. So.
Yeah. Well, then it would be heartfelt or heart seen.
When you're working up a long tale, I imagine you have to piece it together, and you have to be aware of the longer link. Is that hard?
It takes a different process than the shorter stories. You usually have to know where you want to end up and how you want to get there, because there is so much information usually that it's not a matter of putting the story together, it's a matter of setting most of it aside. There's so much you can't use just because of time, or something you haven't totally researched, so you're afraid to put that in till you have. I have found that all my long stories, the first telling, it's fun, and I finally got this baby birthed, but it's going to be a while before the baby grows up. Mm-hmm. Each telling eliminates things that I hadn't intended to eliminate, or brings something in at a different time. It's amazing. It's almost like a live process, a living process that this story is going through. It revises itself, it rejuvenates itself, it grows with each telling. This story that piece that I just told you, How I Came to Dwagiac, I've actually finally written that down. It's almost 20 years since I first created it, and I've put it into book form. And it was ready to go into a book form. But if I had written it back when I started, it would look nothing the way it looks now because of the tellings.
And anyone who wants to buy this, they can get it from your website.
My website, yes.
NancyMariePayne.blogspot.com. Or is it available at any local stores?
It's still available at I Love Book. No, not I Love Books. The one in Stuyvesant.
The little book house.
The Little Book House.
Little
Thank
book
you,
house.
Joe. That's the only place that is other than through me at this time.
Cool.
So
Well, that was helpful.
We have 15 more minutes left. What do we want to do?
Well, I just want to mention my other children. I have a story on, as I said before, on the Underground Railroad, which encompasses more than Easton. I have a story on Kate Stoneman, who was the first female lawyer in New York State, the first woman to pass the bar, and the first woman to graduate from law school. Now, you may think I put that in reverse order, but no, she passed to the bar and became a practicing lawyer before she went to law school. You want to know a little bit more about that? Engage me to tell you the story.
And Albany Law School gives an award every year.
In her name. Yes, the first Governor Cuomo started that. Very good. Yes, thank you, Kate. I also have a story that is just delightful, and I think, and it's from a piece of history, but it's not true. It comes from Alexander Pushkin, a Russian writer in the early 1800s. And he did most of his story in poetry, in lyric, and I don't tell it that way. Not all of his stories, but a good number of them he put in this marvelous poetic form. I encourage anyone who likes sagas and adventure and poetry to look him up. But I was commissioned by a school district around here for their Russian class to tell one of his longer pieces. And that's when I learned Ruslan and Ludmilla by Alexander Pushkin. So I'm going to give you just a fragment of that too, to get you into the framework of the story. A very brave and handsome knight and the people of Kiev hold off an attack, and he is a champion of that battle. He's not the only champion, which adds to the story, but he's the one that wins the hand of the king, and her name is Ludmilla. And so the story starts with the retreating army that has been defeated, and then this wedding scene of Ruslan and Ludmilla. And he carries her to the bridal chamber after the party, and that's the end of Ludmilla. They walk in the chamber, and magic enters the story. And Ludmilla is lifted out of the chamber and whisked away to no one knows where, which starts the long adventure of Ruslan and the other champions trying to find her. So I'm going to tell you where she was taken and put you there in the bedroom when she wakes up. So the last thing she knows is that her lover had carried her into the bedchamber. And now she wakes up in a bed, a marvelously comfortable bed with big, pushy pillows, and the smell of lavender in the room, and the light coming in, and she opens her eyes and has no idea where she is. She's never seen this room before in her life, but it is a very comfortable bed. And she reaches over for her husband, who obviously isn't going to be found because he's not there. She sits up on her elbows wondering, what is going on? Where is everybody? Where am I? And just then, the doors open. And 3 ladies in waiting walk in. She's used to ladies in waiting. She's a princess. They have water, they have soap, they have clean clothes for her and combs to take care of her hair. And they immediately start ministering to her, which she allows them to do because she's a princess. This has happened every day of her life. And then finally she remembers to ask them, where am I? Who are you? But they make no answer. I demand you tell me where I am. What is this place? But they make no sound. And just as quietly as they came in, they leave. They have dressed her, they have coiffed her, and they have left her. Well, she walks over to the door and takes the handle, but it doesn't open. And she looks around this room, and there are huge windows that are curtained. So she runs over to the first set of windows and opens the curtains and looks out onto a snowy wasteland. She's in Siberia. She's never been in Siberia before, but she's heard stories of Siberia with tall mountains and blowing wind and snow. She runs to go to the second window, and as she's on her way, she passes a mirror. She's a princess, and so she stops, and she admires herself in the mirror. Oh, what a beautiful gown. Didn't they do my hair nicely? Oh, I'm going to the window. And she goes to that window and opens it up and looks onto mountains. This is terrible. She runs to the next set of windows, looks back at that mirror to make sure the back of the dress looks just as nice as the front, and finds those windows too. And then she sees another door, a door she hadn't seen before. Oh, it's going to be locked, but it's not. She turns the handle, turns the other door, it's double doors, opens them expecting a wintry blast, only to be hit by the golden rays of the sun, and she is looking on a garden. A magnificent garden that goes on and on and on, and everything is in bloom. And the breezes carry the smell of roses. There is magic afoot. She walks out onto the path. Maybe I can find a stable and get a horse and get out of here. And she runs around in a great big circle and ends up back at the door. Well, that didn't work. What shall I try now? She sees another path that she starts down. This one takes her away from the castle. And tentatively, she walks down this path. And then she smells it. Oh, bacon. Sausages. Someone's making breakfast. And she sees a gazebo. And under the gazebo, tables that are laden with fruit and food. Oh, it would be nice to eat this food. No, I've got to get out of here. I've got to get out of here. So she continues down the path, and it comes with a roar, the sound of water coming over a falls. And she walks out onto a bridge with a magnificent waterfall falling down and splashing, and then the water going under the bridge and continuing down. It must be going to the sea. And then she thinks, wouldn't it serve my captor right, whoever it is, if I jumped off this bridge right now and denied him his prisoner? And her eyes start to roll back in her head as if she's being mesmerized by the sound and the water. And then she says to herself, I'm very hungry. And turns on the path and goes back to the gazebo and sits down and eats a scrumptious breakfast. You can see she's a little fickle, but she is a princess. And so we must forgive her these traits. After her meal, she lays down and pulls one of the pillows that are laying on the benches, and she goes to sleep. And the story continues with her lover and his quests. But I'm going to leave you there.
And that's what Nancy did for 4 years with Telebration.
Yes,
She would tell one chapter
Yes.
every Telebration.
And then have to condense that, the previous one, and then the previous 2, and the previous 3, so you knew where you were.
That was fun. That was fun. And I see that another one of the members of our story circle is now doing that with Pinocchio.
Yes, that for a long time at meetings, Adam Hoffman, our youngest member by several decades, I think, was each month telling a new chapter of Pinocchio, and the original literary version, which was adapted by Disney. And So that was very. Every once in a while, he'd tell another folk tale. We have to wait. Oh, similar to you told stories of a magical cafe in Arizona.
Yes.
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 Several episodes.
Yes,
of that.
I had that. That's a contemporary story, the Van Gogh Cafe,
Yes.
and I had to get the author's permission, which she graciously gave to me to tell those stories. Yes.
Now we have less than 4 minutes left. And I know there's at least one series that you didn't mention, but maybe it's a series and it's not a one long story about the women aviators.
The women aviators. Yes, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that one. The early women in aviation, of which there are some really great stories, characters, all of them. And I do it from the persona of Florence. Oh my goodness. Okay, she's great.
She's known as Pancho?
She's known as, she wants to have herself called Pancho, yes. She wears pants when no other women are wearing pants. She smokes cigars. She swears like a trooper. And she broke many records in aviation, not just female records, but male records. Barnes, Florence Barnes. And that piece brings in all of the original women. It doesn't get into very modern times. We don't go back past the 1920s on that. So we're really looking at the pioneers, the women who were flying with a chair in the air. That was about it. A chair and a set of wings and a propeller.
And the machine oil coming back in
machine
their
oil,
faces.
yes.
Yeah.
And most of them wearing skirts, and then getting to their plane, taking the skirts off, and stowing them so they would fly with pants, which were much more practical and warm. But then when they landed, they had to put their skirt back on. So we're way back in the 1800s for this. So yes, thank you, Kate. Women in aviation. And you tell aviation stories too.
I just have one lady, Harriet Quimby.
Yes. But also you do the modern.
Oh, and the Mercury 13.
Yes.
Yes. Women who wanted to be one of the first astronauts. At the time of the Mercury 7, the first male astronauts in NASA, picked by NASA. Yeah. That was not successful. But eventually, only 38 years later, there's a commander of the space shuttle whose name just flew out.
I know it happens. I think the walls absorb.
Yes,
it.
It just takes it away.
Yes. Eileen Collins.
There you go.
She was a pilot on the space shuttle, and then she was the commander. Yes. So, well, it's time to say goodbye.
Well, Nancy Payne, thank you so much for being with us and for sharing those long tales, for giving us a flavor of long tales.
It was just the tip of the tail.
Tip of the tail. And to you out there, thanks for listening.
And we hope you come back next time to Story by Story.
Much good cheer.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, but I can't tell you why. Seasons go